Hi there, my name is Kendrick, and today I get to have Frank James back. So Frank, welcome back, dude.
Thank you, Kendrick. I'm glad to be here again. Thanks for inviting me back on.
Yeah, for sure, man. Last time we spoke was actually during well, not last time we spoke, but like the first interview was during the pandemic. So it's been a while since our initial interview. But
Yeah.
just to remind everyone what your type is, I know some people think you're another type, but what is actually your full type?
Yeah, my full OP type is double feminine, NIFE, blast, sleep, consume, play.
Gotcha. And so then you're an INFJ. But a lot of people think you're an INFP. Where do you think this INFP thing is coming from?
I don't know. I mean, I think perhaps because in my early days on YouTube, I wasn't like in a good place mentally. So a lot of what I talked about was just like feeling kind of depressed. And I think that people latched onto that and the stereotype of INFP. And I'm sure that, people in the comments will be like, oh no, there's all these reasons and whatever. They'll probably say, oh, Frank dismissed all the reasons. It's clearly inferior TE. Oh, he's going through possibilities right now. That's NE. I think there is there's a surface level amount of typing you can do to arrive at almost any type. I think that it's really about looking at those patterns over time and then seeing like does it hold up. And plus, the other thing is like maybe I am INFP in different personality systems, because it's like it all comes back to the definitions that you're using. And if you're using different definitions than someone else, you can't really argue against the typing of anyone. So,
Right, that makes perfect sense, man. 'Cause, yeah, for sure, everyone has different systems and different definitions. So, of course, in their system, you're something else. In another system, you're going to be something else. Um,
yeah.
so since we did last speak as our first one-on-one interview, we discussed your SF play last and how you said back then you had like a fake play that you were doing. You know, I wonder
Yeah.
what your journey has been like with your SF play last since roughly 4 years ago. Have you gotten a chance to practice it more? Are you using it more? You have a family now, which we'll talk about later on during this interview. How do you see your play now compared to back then?
Yeah. Wow. It's been 4 years since our first one. Wow. I think that the I don't know. SF play, especially when it's SCFE, is like I don't know, it's kind of how do I want to describe it? I feel like that version of play is sort of the most because it's SF, it's like the most maybe grounded down to earth kind of play because it's just about sensing and feeling. Um, so I guess that is also like the most intimidating kind of play to have because it's just like reality and like the gut level feelings and stuff. And maybe the most true form of play that there is. I don't know. I think that over time, especially 4 years ago, I've had more time to fake it until I make it. Not that I've made it, but it's like it feels a lot more natural to be in a play kind of mode where I just let things be more spontaneous and go with the flow. I mean, the half of that play is FE, which isn't really that big of a problem. It's like putting in the spontaneous element of it and kind of just like letting things fly out of control. So I think I'm also better at faking the play, especially on camera. I mean, that's the only place I need to fake it really. But uh, you start to play a character in some way. Well, obviously for videos on YouTube, and then over time you get more comfortable in the character, and then the character and you sort of blur lines a bit. And I think that's where I am now, where you have to boost your energy a bit on YouTube and all that. And when I look back at old videos, even just like 2 years ago, I can tell that my the comfort level in that more extroverted presentation was a lot lower than it is now. And so I'm like, oh, that's terrible. Like I was clearly just faking that. So I think, I mean, and that's like a very practical application of it. Like in my real life, though, I don't know that I'm any further along. I think just maybe because I've been faking it so much for YouTube, uh, I'm more comfortable in kind of bringing that into real life situations and being a little bit more outgoing and spontaneous and fun and not. I think the double extrovert thing I have always thought is sort of like not worrying about getting embarrassed and then like moving on very fast if you do something uh stupid or embarrassing. So that's probably the most difficult part for me because I'm always just like, wanting to make sure I don't do or say something that is not gonna fly well with everyone around me. But yeah, I guess that's sort of where I am in that journey of the play last.
I remember Dave and Shan, they did a deep dive analysis of the play last people, and they said that play last people tend to put on a facade to the tribe. It's like a thing.
Yeah.
And then as a result, you guys drain yourself out of energy, and you're losing energy actually from putting up that front, as opposed to just like doing what like the high play people do, just let loose and just, not having to constrain yourself and just go with the.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
uh,
it is interesting because the whole facade thing, I feel like everyone to a degree has some amount of facade, but then it's like if you are the more introverted you are, especially if you feel some kind of obligation to be socially acceptable, you know, you have to like it's a lot more energy to put up that facade. Like if you're a very extroverted person, yeah, you like you said, you can just be yourself and that's fine and that's what society expects from you and you're doing it. But if you're very quiet, yeah, you got to put in a lot more work and it is draining. It's it leaves you feeling like, okay, well now I think it's just like that classic introvert trope of, oh, I was able to kind of, you know, be social, go to a party or whatever, and now I need to like sleep for 14 hours or something like that, that kind of thing. It's an exaggeration, obviously, but
you know what's funny, man, is when I've seen some of your skits, the one character that you really, really nail really well are the ESTPs. And so from what I can see, you really know what SF play is. You can really play that part, especially when you're doing your skits. But I'm curious to know in like real life application, have you ever done that yourself? Kind of like how you portray the character of the ESTP, kind of like the cool guy, but also chaotic at the same time. Have you ever done that before? Maybe when you were younger, or I know you're in a different stage of life, but hey,
yeah.
maybe you're still doing it. Who knows? Like like did you ever have a face when you were doing stuff like that?
Well, I mean, that's very flattering. I'm glad that you think that that is the type I get spot on because I probably have most fun with those types like ESTP and the ones that are further away from me, like sort of just like the flip opposite. I think I've never really had a phase like that. I think there are times where I can be closer to that character, but I've always like this me now in this stage of life is the most extroverted. Well, no, actually, no, probably when I was in graduate school 10 plus years ago, I was a little bit more able to get close to that uh, level of spontaneity. But I think it was because within that framework of graduate school, it was very controlled. Like it wasn't the real world. It was just sort of like a very small sandbox to play in where I could act a little bit more freewheeling. But no, I think, yeah, maybe I am able to bring a lot of authenticity to that character in particular because it is something I never do in real life. So I'm like, I got to do it now. Like this, this is my chance to be an ESTP is on camera.
That's cool, man. It's like an outlet. I remember
Yeah.
Dave and Shan, they made a video on the lady who did the Simpsons voice, and she's like an ENFJ church lady.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
and then they said that, oh yeah, she's a church lady, so her outlet for chaos is Bart Simpson, because that's the part where she could do that. So I can see the same thing for you, where like, oh, I have the skits, now I can do the crazy ESTP stuff, where like this bite-sized pieces, uh, you know, just to get like some of that outlet out, because it's still part of you, that SF play.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting when you think about acting in particular, because my background is in theater, so I've always found that personality types and OP in particular would be very um what's the word I'm looking for? I guess just useful for people in theater, whether that's actors approaching a role or especially directors who are trying to shape a piece or cast actors, like to understand what the types of those characters are in a play or in a uh, you know, screenplay or whatever it is, and to be able to pick it apart that way and then also match what actors could pull this off. And then to think about like if an actor can pull off certain types, is it more easy for them to do the types that are closer to them or the ones that are the opposite where they can like tap into something that like you said is part of them, but they don't they feel obligated to not do that, because it's like, yeah, my interior, it's like I've got the basically what an ISTP would want to do, but I'm like, well, I can't do that. That would be irresponsible. Like I've got to do the NF. So um yeah, it is interesting, that application of it and acting and portraying, putting on a different mask for a period of time.
For what I've seen from like TV shows and whatnot, like from actors, it seems like the ones who have their like defining moment when it comes to acting is when they're acting the opposite of their type. So
Yeah.
I want to use the example of the Breaking Bad guy, right? Like
Oh yeah, yeah.
he was typed as an ESFP, but in the show, he's like this controlled, you know, mastermind INTJ like kind of person, right?
Yeah.
So it's like he went from this happy-go-lucky ESFP guy to like this like, you know, this crazy INTJ mastermind type, the stereotype essentially. And it's amazing how both those parts is actually the same person, because he is that happy-go-lucky guy, but he inside him there's also that other guy, just like you have like the introverted side, but deep down inside, if someone put like a magnifying glass, there is that crazy party ESTP there. He doesn't get to come out very often, but he is there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a really good point because you're right. What the actor's name was, Bryan Cranston, that's his
right.
name, right? Because he was mostly a comedic actor before that.
Yeah,
And then yeah. So that is interesting how it's like once you play against your type, that's when people are like, oh, wow, you're actually a really good actor. You're not just playing yourself. Yeah.
right. Right. Yeah, same as the Robin Williams guy, right? Whenever he played
Right.
a serious role, he was always completely different too, right? So, the dark side and the light side is within all of us, and we can bring both parts out. And the most compelling side is the one that never comes out, because when it comes out, it's you know, like an explosion.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. I'm trying to think of like because a lot of times you see that with a comedic actor who does the drama and it's like, oh wow, you've proven that you can do both. I'm trying to think of an opposite example where it's like a very serious actor who surprised everyone with a comedic role. Can you think of anything like that? I'm sure it's happened many times. I'm just like struggling to come up with an example.
Maybe Tom Cruise, like he does like action movies usually, and then like he made that Tropic Thunder one year because he got banned from Hollywood
Oh,
for
yeah.
Scientology stuff. In the end, turns out it was like him, and he's like dancing all crazy and stuff, and uh,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's, yeah, it's kind of interesting that you don't see it happening more from serious to comedic. Johnny Depp maybe is another example. He was in that movie, the Jump Street. He got killed in the movie. not spoiler alert, too late. But
Oh man, yeah. Yeah, it's well, and then it's also interesting, like Matthew McConaughey was because I listened to some of his Green Lights uh audiobook, his memoir, and he was getting typecast in all these rom-coms, and then but he wanted to do more serious stuff. But I don't even know, but he's like ISFJ, but was he even playing the ISFJ stereotype before? Like, he somehow got typecast as something that he, wasn't really, and he was trying to come more into who he really was. I feel like is one way of interpreting it.
well, he made that movie with the medicine for people with AIDS.
Right, yeah. Dallas Buyers Club, yeah.
Right. So I think that was kind of different from his norm,
Yeah.
more serious movie. So you could argue that's kind of like him trying to branch out, but um, it looks like he was playing more of an ESTP role in that movie, which is kind of opposite to him as well.
Yeah.
Hustling in the streets, getting the drugs and stuff. So kind of more like, underworld kind of deal. So
Yeah.
yeah, so you could kind of see that. I do want to ask you a different question now. I want to ask you
Yeah.
about your extrovert feeling. I emailed you about this. I don't know if you've given it any thought, but so you're a double decider. You're not like a single decider. So you don't see people as like good and evil. You see, people as having both, essentially. We're capable of being good and capable of being evil, right? So the question I asked you in the email or is with your extrovert feeling, you're able to scan emotions of the tribe and you can see when people are suffering. However, you also know because you have introvert thinking that suffering sometimes is necessary in life for growth purposes, right? Like you can't just pull someone out of that suffering because sometimes they need to go through that suffering because it's going to help them learn something important and then they're going to grow from
Yeah.
it. They're going to be better equipped, right? If you pull them out of it, then they're always going to be dependent, essentially for someone to save them. So how do you know with your extrovert feeling, and also balancing out with your introvert thinking, when to pull someone out of that suffering and when you should, no matter how bad you feel, because you could feel people's emotions without extrovert feeling, you should leave them be and let them go through the process of suffering so that they could
Yeah.
learn to be independent, essentially.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's very applicable to my life now because, I have a 1-year-old running around the house, and just like very uh straightforward things like him learning how to walk and things like that. It's the knee-jerk reaction is, let me help you do everything. Let me make sure that you never are sad. And of course, this is an extreme case because it's a parent-child relationship. But that makes it harder because the feeling wants to help and avoid pain, but then the thinking has to put on the brakes a bit and be like, okay, wait a second, like this, like if you keep doing this, it's not gonna be good. I'd like a really, I think a good example of that with parenting is when you are sleep training a child, because you're trying to get them to learn how to go to sleep by themselves and to be able to soothe themselves to sleep so that they don't need you to rock them for 30 minutes. And then it's like trying to it's like trying to dismantle a bomb, putting a sleeping baby in a crib, like not wake them up. So when you do sleep training, you're like letting them cry for a certain amount of time, and then that amount of time gets longer and longer, and it's brutal. Like, and that's a very visceral thing where it's like, I gotta go in there, the child is suffering, I need to just help him go to sleep. But then the thinking part is like, okay, well, if you do that, then you're gonna keep doing this, he's never gonna learn. But it's interesting. What I'm starting to realize is that there are layers of feeling and thinking all the time for everybody, because it's like, okay, the logic says in that situation, no, um, let him let him cry. This is the process. It's going to work. Eventually, he's going to be able to do it. You got to get that result. But under that is also feeling, because it's like, because I want him to be able to do this by himself, because that's what's best for him. Like I ultimately, he will feel better if I can do that. And it's almost like for me, and maybe for all feelers, it's like you have the feeling up top, then there's a layer of thinking underneath, but then there's also got to be like an undergirding of feeling to finally justify those reasons. So it's like multiple layers of stuff. When it comes to things beyond parenting, it's a little bit more difficult to think of examples that are like personal, you know what I mean? And I think a lot of times there are, just seeing people who are, I don't know, who are upset, who are sad or whatever, in my real life, it's hard to step in with any kind of like rational, okay, I need to let you suffer through this to get something done. I think if you go beyond that to some things that are more impersonal when it comes to like opinions on what should be done about like major problems, or like people in general who are suffering because of different things, it's like, what is the solution? We should go with that to, solve that. That becomes another interesting kind of thing to pull out, where you have your initial empathetic feeling of like, let's just do whatever we can to ease suffering. And I don't know, like I'm not sure that I could give a definitive opinion on how you balance it out. I think it's a case by case thing, and maybe the thing that is most important is trying to pull apart all the different layers of thinking and feeling. And when you have a feeling response to something, okay, well, what are the reasons for that? And then, okay, what are the values that ultimately are the bedrock on top of that? And it could go several layers down. So for anyone who's like trying to find uh, the appropriate response when people are suffering around them, it's probably good to pull it apart that way, and recognize that there's not just like one level of the decision.
I think it's super interesting how, you have introvert thinking and deep down inside you're a thinker, but still it sounds like the boss is the feeling stuff. It's
Oh yeah.
you have the feeling as the foundation still, regardless of how much introvert thinking that you drill through, because that's kind of like how you um, presented your example in this situation. Do you mind if I ask you about your wife?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, cool. So last time we had an email exchange, you said that you think your wife's an ENTJ. I don't know. Do you still feel that she's an ENTJ?
I think the more you get to know someone, it becomes less clear, because you see all different things, and it's like it's hard to pick apart like what is the real pattern here. Plus, the other thing is, the more you get to know someone, the more they don't show their mask anymore. You know what I mean? So a
Right.
lot of times you're getting more of like the, I don't know, sort of like well, I don't know if it's the authentic them, or maybe it's just like when you get to know them more, you're just seeing them at a base level where it's hard to see anything. You're not getting any kind of spikes, you know?
Right.
Uh, and there are times where I'm like, does she really have TE? Because she seems to like be very aware of all of the emotions and motivations and stuff of other people. But then there are other times where it's like, oh, clearly she has TE, because all she, like she's really prioritizing like getting something done, when to me that's like not important at all right now. Uh, I think that I think it's possible that she has the is on the NESI axis, but it's hard to say, like I'm trying to like broaden this conversation to be interesting to people who have no idea, like
No, fair enough.
no one knows my wife, so it's like a very abstract conversation right now. But I think that she it's difficult to pull apart because you see all kinds of things. So at the end of the day, I just say, yeah, ENTJ is close enough for me. Sometimes I'm even like, is she a decider? I don't know. I think, but so I have no real good reasoning for changing. It's sort of like football, when there's a challenge for a penalty, I don't have any overwhelming evidence to overturn the call on the field. So
Well, I wanted to ask because if your wife was an ENTJ, she would have introvert feeling at the very bottom, right? And then it kind of correlates to the question I just asked you about suffering. And the introvert feeling thing, that's like really deadly for those guys, the ENTJs and
yeah,
ESTJs, right? Like that's like the triggering function right there. So there's gonna be like a lot of suffering. And for in your case, with your high extrovert feeling, you're like, this is so easy to solve. I can just jump in and fix this emotional issue for them. But oh, they 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 need to learn how to process their own feelings and emotions because otherwise
yeah,
it's going to be a big problem for them in the long run. They're going to be dependent on you, and I guess some relationships they like being dependent on someone, but
yeah.
so it's like it's one of those tough calls, right? So that's why I wanted to ask you what you think your type wife is like, and then I wanted to follow up with that question. It's like, okay, well, if she's suffering with an introvert feeling trigger, are you gonna jump in and save the day, or like case by case basis, or like
Yeah, well, it's interesting because obviously there are individual differences between everyone, but you Kendrick as someone with Savior TE, maybe you can speak to this, but for her a lot of times it's like I don't really ever see her suffer. Like it's not she's like the emotions, it's the FI gets like passed by. It's not even like, oh, I'm clearly feeling very bad, but I'm just not going to acknowledge it. It's sort of just like they're not even there a lot of the times. Like,
I see.
not that she's an unfeeling robot. It's just that I think it feels like she processes them super fast. And so the times where she is very upset are very few and far between. And there's really been no situation where I felt like it was good for her in the long run to like let her do that. But I don't know, like, how do you feel like you approach, and maybe it's just like seeing it from the outside, it's very different from the inner experience. Like, what do you think people would say about you? Would they say, oh, Kendrick kind of just like doesn't seem to stay very long in emotions, he kind of passes over them? Or would you think they'd say he feels them very deeply, it just doesn't know how to handle them?
um I guess the best perspective to go by is my girlfriend because she knows me the best. And I think what she would say is I get overwhelmed with emotions, and when that happens, she needs to leave me alone, and I go into my dark corner and I sort things out by myself because it is introvert feeling. I don't want people to walk me through it until I'm ready. I don't want the FE person to come in and start. It feels very invasive when the FE person starts to meddle with that emotional processing, kind of like the TE
Yeah.
invasive when they go to the TI person. So it's the same deal. So I think that's the best way I can answer that. For me personally, I like not like, but I like to when I was a kid, I was watching Dragon Ball a lot. I don't know if you know Dragon Ball Z, but
Well, I know of it. I've never seen it though.
okay, well, I mean the basic gist is like the main I guess you could say protagonist of the story. They're called Saiyans, and the more they get hurt, the stronger they become when they recover. So
Yeah.
getting to a point where you're near death puts you in a position where you're much stronger at the opposite side. So they almost purposely get themselves in a situation where they keep getting almost killed so that they can get stronger,
Oh,
rinse and repeat. And then I kind of see humans in kind of like that as well. It's like, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? So for me, personally, when I get to in a situation where I'm emotionally suffering, I know this is a golden moment, and I I I want it. I want it to happen.
oh wow.
And then the thing is, people see me suffering. I am suffering, right? but I'm like, no, 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 no. Don't pull me out of the suffering. Leave me alone. I will get myself out of it. I'm gonna come up with a conclusion with my FI, and that conclusion is gonna help me make better decisions later on. And even
Hmm.
though I'm a jumper ENFP and I have savior TE, the grand stack still matters. So I still have introvert feeling as my second one. So it is still quite strong.
Yeah.
You could say a bigger container than my extrovert thinking, So um, yeah. So yeah, anyways, with that being said, so I think for me suffering is a positive thing
Yeah.
from a growth perspective, but I think for other people like the ESTJs and ENTJs, sometimes it's unbearable because it's that introvert feeling is their triggering function, right? My triggering function is introvert sensing. That if I was in that position and I was really suffering because of some stupid SI stuff that happened. Like for example, one of the things that triggers me the most is if I'm driving, I put groceries in the back of the car in the back seat, and then I hit the brakes and all the groceries falls on the floor.
Yeah.
I get really, really triggered. I'm like absolutely triggered, right? If I spent like a lot of time filling out paperwork, I submit it, let's say to the government or some kind of body that requires me to fill out documents, and they're like, "Oh, you missed one line. You got to do the whole 5 pages again." I'm like, Are you kidding me?" So that is like suffering for me. Like, but it's not the emotion that actually gets me. It's the SI, right? But that's why I wanted to ask you about your wife, because then if she was an ENTJ or a variant of some sort, then the FI would be the main source of suffering, not just emotionally, but also triggering as well, right? For you, it's the SE,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. 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 I'm not exactly sure. I feel like with my wife, I kind of just I don't know. I'm confused by my own wife. I don't know. Yeah, so I think I could say for sure TE is a savior and probably number one, and that's about as confident as I could say and be like sure of it.
Oh, you think your wife is a social number one? Like she's hyper
Oh,
competitive?
no, no, no. Number one is in dominant. Yeah. No, well, as for social type, I don't know. I hadn't thought of it. I mean, this could be a perfect segue to that
Right. It is.
subject
It
matter.
is right. Um,
Yeah.
let's do it then. Let's talk about your social type first, and then maybe you can make a guess on what you think your wife is. So, you mentioned before we started the interview, this is not an area that you've taken a deep dive in. So, uh,
Yeah.
but you know the basic gist of it, and I'm more than happy to also elaborate on certain aspects of it. So what do you think is your social type?
Well, I know I'm not a one or a four, so I would like initially I was like I'm probably a three because and their thing is all about like specializing, but I guess it's possible I'm a two. What is the two's first thing? Is it um I forget because it's something and then friends after that.
Right. Can I
Uh
can
Go
I
jump in, yes. Take
okay,
take
okay.
over. I'm floundering.
Sure, sure. No worries, dude. So let me go over the four parts, just quickly summarize it for you so you get like a better idea of
Yeah.
the stuff. So I want to use the animals first. So each animal actually activates a certain social type. So it can cause cognitive dissonance as a result. So for example, blast is correlated with specialization, and you have blast first, hence why you would think you are a number three because you're blasting, taking your known information and refining it, right? Over and over again, right?
Yeah.
And then secondly, sleep, which is your second animal, it's correlated with number one, which is flex, right? Or achieving essentially, right? So and then consume, your third animal, that is correlated with social type number two, which is the generalist. So essentially what the consume is doing is it's consuming multiple different skill sets that you're acquiring, and instead of honing them with your blast, you keep gathering new ones, and as a result you become like a jack of all trades, master of none kind of deal, right? uh
Yeah.
there's more aspect to it too. I'll elaborate in a second. And then obviously number four is friends. That one, no explanation is needed. That's correlated
Yeah.
with play because you have to connect with people with play essentially, right? So number ones, their saviors is flex, followed by number two, which is the generalist, or previously called um, the responsible one. Um, And then the third is the first demon, specialization, followed by the major demon, which is friends. So, the saying is it's lonely in the top because you've sacrificed all your friends to get to the top. And like one of the things that number ones do is they tend to see people as stepping stones to higher status as opposed to someone that they want to connect with and build a genuine connection with. It's kind of it sounds like kind of like a sociopathic thing to do, but it is what it is, and that's how it is. I've interviewed a lot of number ones, and they said, "Oh, don't want to admit it, but that's how they see relationships." You are
Yeah.
someone that's gonna propel me to the next level. You know, and then number two is obviously it's savior responsibility slash generalist. They Dave likes to call them savior scam. So he likes to call it savior scam because number twos, they always come up with some kind of business idea that they can monetize, and um, they get a little bit itchy. They don't want to stay put in just one business. They want to keep jumping around. And I
Hmm.
wanted to talk to you about your YouTube channel as well because I've noticed that even in your own YouTube channel, you're getting a little bit itchy. Like you at first you were doing
Yeah.
the skits, and now you're doing like months, and then there's like some other stuff going on, and then now you have your second YouTube channel, and then you are
Yeah.
doing interviews there, but you're also doing other stuff there. So I see that like is Frank a number two because like he's getting itchy. He wants to do like other stuff, even though he's an IJ. There's like a compulsion to not like get stuck in a box. Like I always feel like he's trying to break out of his like where he cornered himself. The 16
Yeah.
personality
Yeah.
skit. So and because if you were a specialist, you would not get itchy at all. So I'm like, why is he getting like where's the compulsion coming from to do this other
Yeah.
thing, right?
Yeah.
And then I think someone said like a long time ago, like you went on a podcast or something, and then someone asked you, it's like, what's your goal for your channel? And you said it's monetization, right? So it's like, oh, that's like a number two thing. It's like I'm here to generate income, right? So essentially, which is like, AKA what Dave said, save your scam, right? No offense. I'm not saying you're a
Yeah.
scam, but like,
No, no, no. Yeah.
but so yeah, and then obviously the thing with number twos though, what's interesting is they are also save your friends. So the work comes first, but they still care about their friends. So it's like one of those things where like you see like a slimy salesperson, maybe me doing like selling a car or something, and like I think the hardest thing to fathom is that person that's trying to sell you stuff is actually genuinely friendly also. It's like
Yeah.
it's like both can exist at once. Like kind of like Tony Robbins, he kind of comes across as a slimy salesperson sometimes.
Yeah.
He's always pushing his books, his seminars and whatnot. But he generally has friends though. And he actually cares about people. He just wants to make money. He wants both. So it's not like a bad
Yeah.
per se. So, anyways, the third for number twos is flex. So they do have flex. It's not missing, but it's like there's like a small area where you kind of like show off in. Like for me, I'm like a number two. I was typed as a number two, so my area of flex is travel. So I'm like, oh yeah, been to 100 countries, and then that's it. That's all I'll flex about, right? So, it's like Dave refers to it as chill flex. Like you'll drop it and you get out. You don't leave. You don't flex enough that it becomes cringe. It's just like drop
Yeah.
it. Um, and then obviously the hardest is specialization, right? And then the next one is number three, so which is the specialist, and the specialist actually no, they crave routine. They like to specialize on one thing, be the best at that one thing. Hence, that also savior flex as well. If you think about like the best doctors, they're probably, especially if it's like a specialist kind of field, could be plastic surgery, it could be dental work, the best person at a root canal or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
Like that's gonna be the specialist, right? Or like the best pizza place, that's gonna be a specialist, right? And then obviously their demon is friends. So they're kind of like the number twos where they have the chill flex. Here they have friends, but they might only have like one or two, you know. So they still have them, but it's not a lot.
Yeah.
And then obviously the last is generalist or responsibility. So one of the things that the number threes get a flack about is being a complaint machine. That's kind of like a cross check that David Shan have about the number threes. It's like they're always complaining about something. But if you really do a deep dive on the number threes, and you can probably relate to a lot of this because you do a lot of your you script your videos, you film it and you edit it and then you publish it, right? Like if someone comes up to you and bothers you while you're doing all that stuff, of course you would be upset, right? And then you don't want to be doing other stuff when you should be focusing on the work, right? So of course you would be upset. So like for me, for
Yeah.
example, now that I run my own, I make my explainer videos, I'm realizing I'm like, oh my God, now I don't want people I don't want to hang out with people. I don't want to, uh,
Yeah.
be distracted with other tasks. Like even going to the gym, that's like annoying because like now I have to think about it's taking away the focus from the stuff that needs to be done. So of course I would be complaining.
Yeah.
I would be complaining, of course. So I understand where the
Yeah.
complaining is coming from the number threes. Like now that I'm doing some of the specialist kind of work. But
Yeah.
anyways, so that's that. But anyway, so for the number threes though, what they're missing is um because they're not doing the generalist stuff, they're not aware that the number twos, they have so many responsibilities on their plate, and they would really appreciate it if you helped out a little bit from the other stuff. I understand they understand if they can't, but at least you can empathize, right? Like verbally, which also goes a long way. So I think, obviously both those types can help each other if they see each other's perspective, right? And then
Yeah.
obviously the last one, no explanation needed. Number four are friends, save your friends, and then specialists. A lot of number fours are really good at specializing also, but they're really friendly. So that's like the biggest difference.
Ah.
Like Post Malone, for example, is a number four, great singer, right? But very talented, specializing in the music. So they can be as good as a number three as well, just more friendly, and then they have when they get older, they get the savior responsibility slash generalist gets activated also. So they might take on a management role, or they might be more just responsible for stuff in their life, kind of like Post Malone right now. There was an interview about him, about his alcohol addiction, and then he was asked, "Are you still, are an alcoholic?" And he said, "No, I'm responsible now." So it's kind of like, oh, now he's that two is now activated, and now he can
Yeah.
take care of that. And obviously, last but not least, they are demon flex, and they get really triggered by people who overly brag or show off and stuff. So yes, that's a long tangent that I went through, but knowing all
No,
the
it's
information,
good.
where do you think you feel like you resonate with the most? And I'm happy to elaborate on any other
I
factors.
mean, it's difficult because I mean, I feel like two and three both seem to apply to me because it's like I mean, you're right. It's like with my channel, I'm trying out different things in large part. Well, it's not just like a general like, oh man, I got to do something different. But there's like sort of just like the artist, you know, temperament of like you want to be able to kind of have the freedom to try different things, try different creative avenues. I do really uh feel like the jack of all trades, master of none fits me well. But then I also feel like this, I don't know, the specialization does it, which those are like completely contradictory. So I have no idea because some of the things are aspirational where it's like I aspire to do a lot more things and I don't. And then I also aspire to like get more specialized. I feel like I'm almost in between where I can't fully commit to just, but then it's like, I mean, all I do is YouTube. So,
Right.
so I don't know. Like it's tough for me to s see it clearly enough to know like which one I would be closer to because I do feel like I complain a bit, but I I really don't know. Yeah.
Hey, it's all good.
It's
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 all good,
tough. Yeah.
especially for you because you have blast first, and then if you look at your actual animal stack, blast activates number three, specialist, and then you have sleep, which activates flex. So number threes are specialist and flex. So your animals is also specialist and flex, right? Uh,
Yeah.
and then your third is consume. That's more the generalist, the number two. So it's a demon. So kind of like still a demon regardless. And then
Yeah.
yeah, and then number four is obviously friends. So um I guess the biggest question then would lie to the number your consume then. How are you when it comes to collecting skill set with your SETI, like how are you
Oh
when it comes to
yeah.
developing a new skill set, whether that be filming techniques or editing technique, or it could be business also from the business side, from the back end, like how are you aggressive with that or not so much, like are you collecting
Yeah.
skills?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, I mean, I might be then I kind of the classic jack of all trades, master of none, because I feel like I can pick up and become slightly proficient at a lot of things fast, but then I'm like never very good at any of them. So that, yeah, I do, and I do like the idea of collecting more skills and learning how to do different things even if I don't necessarily do it. I guess what I'm struggling with is knowing where I would lie on the spectrum of these different things. And it's weird because I feel like the social types are a lot more intuitive than any of the other uh, components of uh, objective personality. But for some reason, I just can't intuitively figure it out for my own self.
I think you're one of those. I mean, for the longest time you didn't have a type twin, right? Like you were like the only one of this specific type.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean,
And there's still only like four, I think, that have been typed this specific one. Yeah.
yeah, it's not common for sure. So it's like your type is full of cognitive dissonance as a result from what I can see. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, even me personally, when I got my social type, they thought I was a four for the longest time, but they were even telling people I was a four. It's like, oh yeah, that Kendrick guy's a four, and I'm like, doesn't
Yeah.
I'm like something feels off. I don't feel like because like one of the things, if you look at the cross check of the four is they take everything seriously and they take everything at face value, which is kind of crazy because my girlfriend's a number four, and I'm always telling her I'm like, when people are tricking you, they're not. That's not what they mean. They're saying that, especially the number ones, right? Like the number ones are acting a certain way, but there's like ulterior motive behind the scenes, and I'm like, no, that's not what they're not. They're saying that because they have this ulterior motive. They're only saying that to keep the status here. They don't want to look bad, So,
Yeah.
and I can see the ulterior motive. I don't relate with the number fours. I'm not someone that's taking things at face value. So when I finally sent all my documents to Dave to get to the bottom of this, he took the time to analyze everything, and he's like, "Well, what do you know? You are not a four. You're a two. And he's like, you do have your scams, quote unquote. You're just blowing them up. That's what he said to me. And then he said you do have flex, it's not missing. So it's like, so it's kind of like in that case where like I got mistyped originally from my social type just because of how my animals align, where play is correlated with friends, right? So number four, right?
Mm.
And then blast, I'm the rare ENFP. There's only like two in the community ever that has blast savior ENFP. So um
Ah.
so like, okay, I have blast savior, which is correlated with specialization, right? And then consume is number two, and then number one last, right? So I'm like, I'm a straight flush number four, but then why is there's a cognitive dissonance? How come I don't resonate with it? You know what I mean? Like there's something is off.
Right.
And then ultimately Dave said, um, as a number two, work is the top most important thing. It's work because number twos are obsessed with working, right? It's like work above friends. It's like you're sneaking out to do work. Like um, he said, you're double activated play. You should not be sneaking out to do work. But why? But you are. You are finding a way to get away from people so you can do work. It's almost like TI. Like number twos are weird.
Yeah.
That's like they're almost like the TIFE axis, where like you do the TI work, and then you do the extrovert feeling celebration with the tribe after, right? You know,
Right. Yeah.
yeah. So they're like, yeah, number twos are doing that weird thing, right? And I'm doing it. I'm not even TI, but I'm like, I'm gonna go away from everyone. F off. I'm gonna go do my work. Then later on we can hang out, because I'm still Savior friends. Like, I'm gonna go watch a movie with you guys, play video games, go out for dinner, whatever, right? So and in your case though, it's kind of interesting because I see you prioritizing work above all things. So that the things with number three, they prioritize a work-life balance a lot, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I do my 8 hours and then I'm gonna do my hobbies, it's like that kind of deal. But like I kind of the way I see you is you're a workaholic. Like you want to work. And then
Yeah, I would say that's accurate. Yeah.
yeah, and then like the friends thing, I feel like it's because you're play last. That's why you're not doing more of it. But I
Yeah.
I think you have good intentions, but you don't because of the play last, you're like, can't be bothered,
Yeah.
Like I mean that's just my perspective. I don't know like how true that sounds or if you
I mean, that sounds pretty, yeah. I mean, work-life balance is not I like it's more like, yeah, work as much as I can, and then if I take off, then it's like all in on that. So it's not really like, yeah, I think that was the one thing that made me doubt originally that I was a 3 is them describing it as like, yeah, they wanna do the 9 to 5 and then get off and do, their hobbies or whatever. I'm like, "That's not really, yeah, that doesn't really sound like me," but, um, yeah, so that would be, 2 evidence in the 2 column. I think you're right there.
Okay. Well, you know what? We can just leave it be, but
Let's leave it there.
yeah, but that's just my guess for you.
I actually I think it's a pretty, good, insightful, guess.
Now, speaking of work,
Yeah.
most people know you for your channel where you do your comedy skits and whatnot, and you also throw in some advice as well for people.
Mhm.
And but most people don't know you have a second channel. What is the purpose of that second channel? Because I've seen you do like a bunch of random stuff where you're giving tips to content creators, you're interviewing people,
Yeah.
so it's like a bunch of like random stuff. So I don't know if it's just like a creative outlet where um instead of being boxed in, kind of like in your main channel, it's
Yeah.
like an area where you can do whatever you want and just play around and see what sticks, almost like TV,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, yeah, that is what it is. It's sort of like, just thoughts that I have. It's you do get boxed in on YouTube because once you have a once it becomes a job and you have an audience that shows up regularly, you can't do anything you want anymore. Well, I mean, you can, but it's just like you're like running a risk of turning people off.
Yeah.
So the second channel, I mean, I made the second channel, I started a long time ago, and it was primarily just YouTube advice originally. And then I realized like I just don't want to do that anymore because I felt like it was too difficult to produce and it was um like I just felt like I wasn't reaching anybody with it. So this in the past year I was just like I'm just going to use this to talk about kind of whatever's on my mind and maybe just more like stuff about creativity in general. And then I started doing the interviews with people because in some ways it was just an excuse to reach out to various YouTubers and say, "Hi, let's talk about YouTube." Because as a YouTuber, it's a lonely job where you don't have coworkers. It's
Right.
like
Right.
very and you have to make an effort to meet other people who do the same thing. And it's good to be able to just like talk to those other people and, see what they're going through and if it's, similar to what you're going through and all that. And yeah, and I feel bad because I have like 3 podcast episodes in the can, including one with Dave that have been sitting there for months that I just haven't released yet, in large part because it's like it's one of those things where as time grows since I recorded it, it becomes more and more daunting to go back and like release it. And I don't know why. There's just I don't know. There's like some part of my brain that's just like, what if you said something really dumb and you needed to edit it out, but you forgot? And it's like this kind of OCD tendency to be like, but what if I accidentally said my social security number on camera and now I need to cut it out, but I forgot. So yeah, I really need to release. I did an episode with Zach Starr, who does comedy sketches. That was a really good episode. I really need to put that out. Then with Chad Reynolds, who runs a channel called Clean My Space, which has been on YouTube for I don't 10 plus years, and then with Dave. So I need to definitely get those out in the world.
See, this is why I think you have to save your friends. It's just like your play last. That's why it never happened sooner. But I feel like there's like that,
Yeah.
like there's a part of you that like I can sense that you wanted to connect with people. It's just like the play last was getting in the way. So
Yeah.
which is probably a good thing because then if you had that play activated high, you would not be where you are today because you would not be able to prioritize anything because that play really gets, it really is really distracting,
Oh
Um,
yeah, I imagine so. Like a lot of I feel like a lot of the key to being successful in certain fields, and YouTube is probably one of them, is the ability to just like shut yourself off from everybody and just work on something for a long time. And it doesn't even is a lot of times it never even occurred to me that I could be doing something else or like being with friends or something. I just didn't, it wasn't even a thought in my head. It was like, oh, I'm just gonna work on a video for 8 hours, you know?
you know what's interesting though is Mr. Beast is kind of similar to you. He's also play last as an ENFP. He's consume, sleep, blast play. He
Yeah.
took an opposite route from you, where he like talks to people all day
Yeah.
in his early stages. I don't know if you saw those interviews, and then he
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
a mastermind thing happening, and then but then same result obviously, success in the end, right? So I thought it was interesting. The second
Yeah.
thing I wanted to point out is don't you have a team that you work with? So you technically kind of have coworkers, or it's not the same because you're like the boss, and then you have people
Yeah.
under you.
Well, on the yeah, well, yeah, it's not quite the same because I'm the boss, but it's not like a team where so they're, it's like so they're not employees, they're contractors because they don't do enough work for me that it would be even like a decent part-time job. But yeah, so I have one my friend Kevin, who I've known for a long time, uh became my editor a couple years ago, and he doesn't edit all my videos, but he edits, I would say, half of them. And then I do have a writer that I've worked with for a few years, actually a couple writers, and one of which is my friend Holly, who used to write a lot more for me. She writes one every once in a while. Um, I've actually stepped back a lot because I was trying to scale up. I think last year a lot of uh, maybe it was just my awareness of it, but it seemed like there was a big trend on YouTube to be like, here's how Mr. Beast does it. Let's see what he does and try to do that. And I mean, it makes sense. It's like he's the most successful YouTuber. He's obviously doing best practices. Let's see what he's doing because so we can get more views. But I think that made a lot of YouTubers feel like they needed to scale up and be entrepreneurial and stuff. And I bought into that as well without even like thinking I was buying into anything. I was just like, well, this is the way to do it. So I was trying to scale up and hire people to do more. And I realized like I am enjoying this job exponentially less now because I'm just like managing people rather than doing kind of a more inefficient, messy, but creative process where I do most of the stuff.
Right,
And so yeah, this year I have scaled back a lot, which makes it so that I am also scaling back the amount that I produce because it's just like there's no point in doing it unless I've got my fingers all over everything. And it's interesting because I saw uh, Matt Davella recently released a video where he basically said the same thing, like the same stuff that was going through my mind, where he scaled up and he didn't like making videos that way. So now it's just him again. And I'm like,
right,
wow. So I think a lot of YouTubers have gone through this phase where it was this, we got to scale up. We got to look at this as a business. We got to hire people. And then everyone realizing, wait, that's not why I started this. So, um, yeah, so I do work with people, but I keep it in check and I try to leverage it as much as I can to allow me to be more creative rather than scaling up so much that I'm just a manager and telling people how to do their job, which is not very fun.
right.
So yeah.
I wonder if that's like an introvert thing versus introvert thinking thing versus extrovert thinking, because like, obviously Mr. Beast has extrovert thinking and you have introvert
Hmm.
thinking, and work is personal to you. It's almost like the creative outlet for you. For him, it's like for him it's purely business, right? Like it's like
Yeah.
I want to be the best because competition is what drives him, right? He's the number one, right? So, you know,
Yeah. It was interesting. Like I wonder what his like core motivation and like what gets him going. I mean, is it just views? Is it just being the best? Is it, I don't think it's money, but is it the prestige? Is it getting as big as possible? Because yes, it is appealing to me to be like, let's see if I can get more views. Let's see if I can get more people to watch this. But that is sort of secondary to let me see if I can do something different creatively that stands out. And like the views are a metric of that. Like, oh, more people watch this and gave it the thumbs up. But the point is more like something different came out of my brain than what I have produced before. And I had this artistic, creative kind of thing I was trying to do, and I did it and I pulled it off. And I'm built, and it's more like building something creatively than necessarily any kind of business. I mean, like it's nice that I make an income from it. And, obviously you want that to be bigger rather than smaller, but that's not even close to the top of the motivating factor for me.
I think there was an interview with Casey Neistat, INFJ also
Yeah.
jumper. He's pissed off that everyone's becoming a Mr. Beast clone now. Like all the thumbnails look like Mr. Beast.
Yeah.
The style looks like him. They're doing the stunts kind of like him. So he's like the creativity is starting to go away, and
Yeah.
everyone's just kind of like doing it for the subscribers, kind of like what Mr. Beast is doing. Funny enough, before we start doing this interview, I was actually watching his interview. There was like a podcast. I forgot the exact name, but it's something about like how to conquer the world or something. And then they asked Mr. Beast what his core motivation was, and Mr. Beast said, "It's winning. Winning is the core motivation." He said, "It's not money. It's winning. Like being the winner."
Yeah.
So it's like totally like a number one motivation. Like I need to beat people. I need to win. It's like yeah, it's different, obviously. For you, that's why you're not a number one, because that's not
Right. Yeah.
crushing people and stomping them is not your core motivation, right? You know.
Right. Yeah.
Um
Exactly.
yeah, so I just thought that was interesting. Another thing that's interesting also, and I want to segue to this last topic. I don't know how much time you have, but like, just give me
I
a
I can go, 10, 15 more minutes.
Sure. Okay, sounds good. So one of the things I emailed you was about for the topic is ADHD. Okay, so I wanted to talk about that because I have ADHD. You might have it too. I noticed that a lot of INFJs have it also.
Oh yeah.
Seems like an intuitive kind of thing to have ADHD.
Yeah.
Also, I think Mr. Beast has it because I was watching his interview, and when the interviewer was asking him, what's your routine for work? And his answer was like, when he has an idea, he needs to work for like 10 days in a row without stopping because it's like
Yeah.
with ADHD, you get hyper focused, right? Until he crashes, essentially, right? And then I was sitting there, I was like, I've never related more to something in my life.
Yeah.
And it kind of makes me so mad and at the same time kind of like sad that like I have high friends and high play because I always think about my girlfriend. I'm like, she wants to talk to me at this time of the day, this time of the day, this time of the day. But man, when that hyper focus kicks in, I don't want to talk to anybody. I just want to work.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like the deal. But for you personally, have you ever felt like you had ADHD, or is that something that you felt like you don't have, never had to deal with? Do you have something
Yeah.
else instead of ADHD? Like you mentioned OCD earlier, So yeah, I just
Yeah. I've got all kinds of you know, wiring issues probably. I would say that with ADHD, yeah, I do probably I'm probably diagnosable with that in some way. It's like I think the thing is with a lot of people who go undiagnosed into adulthood, they were able to kind of get by somehow, and I think um it's become more apparent like when you're running your own business, I think especially if think you can't like mask anything anymore.
yeah.
Like when you're going through school or when you're working for someone else, it's kind of easy to just barely do the bare minimum, and then you have deadlines imposed by other people. But when it comes all on you, and like the deadlines are all of your own making and everything, it becomes a lot harder. So yeah, I've definitely seen there's like more of a struggle, and a lot of those classic ADHD things, like, not being able to like wrap up a task, and like just having trouble finding the motivation to get started. Or like I've seen that channel, How to ADHD.
Right.
She was talking about like even simple tasks in your mind. There is like she calls it the wall of awful that you have to get through, where it's like you want to do something simple like cut the grass, but then your mind is like, well, if I do that, then I have to do this, and this to get there, and it's just like too much, and now I can't do anything.
Right.
Yeah, so that's very relatable. And I think just being a creative person, uh, that is, I don't know how, like, if it's just something that all creative people sort of have that same wiring or what, but it definitely makes things difficult because you want to run on inspiration, because then that's when the dopamine is hitting your brain and you're like, okay, let's go. I know how to do this. And definitely it is easier to work when I feel like I have a really good idea that I'm working on. But then when it's just like another day at the office and I've got to make a video and I'm not really feeling it, it's like a lot. It's like I better, chug some cold brew and like get jazzed to get in the mindset. So, that's definitely uh those type of uh symptoms, I guess, of, just trying to stay on task or get something started and then wrap it up at the end. Because the another ADHD thing is like you have to have a deadline, and then you have to wait until right before the deadline to do
Right.
the work, because you can't get motivated until then.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, like, we had to postpone this interview because I waited till the last second to do a video. So yeah, I relate a lot to it. And I wonder eventually like what kind of research will come out of it, like the connection between, and maybe there is research already, like the connection between personality and ADHD, and like being people who identify as more artistic or creative, and ADHD and things like that. Because it's not just a disorder, like it's a neurodivergence, isn't it? So it's like your brain is wired differently. So maybe that's just comes with the territory of being creative, is your brain just works differently, and you take one with the other. And yeah, I don't know. It is an interesting thing to think about, because I've often thought like I'm really not cut out for the typical like productive work world. Like I'm very lucky that I've been able to find work doing something creative. And I'm sure you feel similarly, that you're not uh that you're able to do things like travel and do YouTube and all that, and have these kind of things, rather than trying to force yourself through some kind of very unnatural path, you know?
Right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, that's why I'm traveling for a year right now, because as a digital nomad, so I can focus on YouTube, because I did 1 year stint having a 9 to 5 day job. First time ever in my life. I've always worked in fitness, so I never really quite noticed it as much.
Hmm.
And then I did the whole desk job stuff. I'm like, I can't do this. I really can't. I'm really bad at this. I can't sit here and grind for 8 hours like these my other coworkers are doing. And I don't think it's healthy, because I'm looking at my coworkers too. They look like they're really in bad health. Like sitting there
Yeah.
grinding for 8 hours for your whole life. So I'm like, oh my God. Um, so definitely for sure. I didn't get diagnosed with ADHD until I'm like 39 years old, right? So it's I kind of already know that, like, how to work with it. Like I know when I have ADHD, like an attack going on, it just means I need to go to the gym and do some cardio.
Yeah.
And then usually, but after cardio, I can focus again. That's something I noticed. Spoke to a psychologist. Apparently, drinking coffee helps with the ADHD also. Um, so and then in that video that you mentioned, how to eat ADHD, that lady, she said that most people with ADHD end up being business owners because there's so much dopamine coming your way all the time when you're in charge of an enterprise, right? Like you have to deal with people, you have to produce, you have to create. There's a lot of stuff happening, and it's more stimulating than um, grinding away at a desk essentially. Um,
Yeah.
and then I think the other thing is like I think for you, because you're an introvert, I think most people who are introvert they have inattentive ADHD as opposed to hyperactive.
Yeah.
So it's like less likely to get diagnosed because um, you know, usually the hyperactive ones get diagnosed because they're causing trouble in their class. They're like the ESTP
Right.
that you make in your skits, right? Like, they're like causing
Yeah.
so much
Yeah.
problem that someone has to pump them with meds to get them to sit still, right?
Yeah.
And they're giving them meds not to help them, but to like prevent chaos,
Yeah.
So, which is horrible because I think those meds, like, I think they should be used, like not all the time, in my opinion. Like, I started taking the meds sometimes, and the one thing I noticed with the meds is the moment I take it, I have access to introvert sensing. It's like magic, man. It's like, oh my God, you can use introvert sensing. Like
Wow.
I can grind away at some boring tasks for like, for like 6 hours. And I'm like,
Yeah.
and then now I use it strategically. Like I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have a day where I need to do all the SI. I'm gonna go pump
Yeah.
myself, just for that one day because it has a lot of side effects too. Like you can't sleep,
Mm.
so it's obviously not good to get
Yeah.
stuff. And it's really crazy because like those ADHD companies, they have programs where they give it to you for free to get you hooked in it. And then
Oh, yeah.
yeah, apparently it's up to like 4 years. Like you get four years of free supply, and you can take as much as you want. And then and by then you're hooked, and then now you can't get off that because like you can't function without this pill, right? So like my pharmacist friend told me about this, like how this is actually a thing, So
Huh.
and it's so
Wow.
expensive. Those pills are expensive, dude. They're like $200 to $400 for like a bottle of it, right?
Wow.
So
Yeah.
you hook people on that on life, hey, you're cashing in, right? It's horrible, but
This is what a profitable business model, I'm sure. Yeah. I
yeah.
mean, yeah, it's I guess that it makes sense though why coffee helps, a stimulant to keep you going.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, those ADHD meds, you know what they are, right? They're like meth, So
Oh, really?
yeah, they're made of meth. Like, like you're taking meth when you're taking those things. Obviously they're like a clinical grade. They're not like the ones that, the Breaking Bad kind of meth,
Right. Yeah. They're not made in a basement somewhere.
Yeah, or like a trailer, So,
Yeah.
so anyways, dude, one last comment before we wrap the interview.
Yeah.
I noticed before, I think this is where your tribe above self really comes out. And also, like earlier, you were talking about like being boxed in, and I forgot to mention this, but now I just want to mention it. I noticed something interesting. There was one time I think in your channel, you said that there was like one Friday or something. You're like, no video today, guys, and then someone said, "Oh no, I need your video to get me through the weekend," and you're like, "Okay, um, let me see if I can put something together last minute." And I'm like, when I saw that, I was like, oh geez, you are tribe above self, um,
Wow.
like you already made a decision not to make a video that day, but then someone said, oh, I need this, and then and then you did it, right? And it's almost like getting boxed in. Earlier you said you don't want to disappoint people, so like the moment someone did that, and then you're like, okay, I'm gonna put something together. I was like, oh my god, he is, play last, but still tribe above self. I'm still gonna
Yeah.
something for the tribe, So what were you thinking when that happened?
Well, I don't remember that particular comment, and it's entirely possible that I said something. I was probably, if I said that, what probably was happening is there was an edit that I was working on that was not going to be done until like 3 or 4 in the afternoon, and by that time I'm like, it's too late to release a video, or my editor Kevin was working on it. I'm like, it needs more time. So I was probably just like there's a chance we could turn it around, so I'll give this person some hope. Or I might have just been like totally joking and like not, or just trying to. Either way, I was trying to make the person feel better because it's a very nice, flattering thing to be like, oh no, I need your video to get me through the weekend. But yeah, I mean, because if I ever say I can't get a video out in time, it's because it's like physically, logistically impossible to do so. So there would be no way that I could actually do it. But if I said it, it's like, well, there's maybe a chance I could because it's close enough. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, I feel a bit of responsibility for the audience and showing up to give them, their bit of entertainment for the week. You know?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
you, you gotta have, I don't know, because it is like they're the customer, you got to show up and give them what they are not paying for, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Not paying for, but kind of like their
Kind,
presence is
yeah,
yeah.
I get like 0.01 cent per view, so I sort of in a
Yeah.
way, yeah, their presence, yeah.
Yeah. But I think it's goodwill, if anything, because
Yeah.
like with Mr. Beast, he gives away all those free money and food and whatnot. And so he has that like NF positive energy behind him. So it's kind of like you're um, you know, stacking your positive energy on your end. Because even though it's intangible, it is real. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I can see like that's kind of what you're doing is just stacking the NF. And I kind of wish those people with NF last can see what NF is and how it actually is real, even though you can't see it and can't touch it. It's like I don't know how to explain
Yeah.
it. I don't know how to explain to people that it's real, but it is, like
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it is that thing that's just like you couldn't quantify it or prove that it's there, but it's like, well, yeah, but it's doing something still, you
yeah,
know?
yeah, 100%, dude.
Yeah.
All right, Frank. We'll wrap up the interview here. So, hey, man, appreciate you coming out and sharing more about your life, your family, your wife, and parenting your child. And doing the FETI and FB again to make sure your son doesn't, you know, kill himself, but also at the same time learn to put himself to sleep. So,
Yeah.
appreciate the update.
Yeah, well, Kendrick, thank you for having me on your channel. It's always a pleasure to speak with you. I appreciate all the thoughtful questions and the insights that you have.
All right, dude. Uh, appreciate your compliment. I'll stop the recording here now. So I'll just wave goodbye to everyone. Thanks for watching. See you next time.